8 degrees centigrade this morning, and if you look at it, you'll see a humidity of 95 degrees right there. That road that veers off is going straight into the Secretariat, Lagos State Secretariat, the seat of government in Lagos. Welcome to Lagos. I'm Ayo Makinde.
All right, so take a look at that. Yes, indeed, the nominated members of the Edo State National Governorship Primary Election Committee and Election Appeal Committee of the APC will be inaugurated today. This is all inching towards preparations for the big one, the Edo State governorship elections. Of course, most of the parties are all gearing up, lots of activities going on there, but we'll bring you all of them, as we always do when we get them here.
And still on the Edo governorship election, the Labour Party will conclude screening of aspirants. That's another big story that we're looking forward to today. Of course, we are on ground. Everyone is getting ready to see how this particular event pans out. But those are some of the major things we have happening today. And you have there on your screen the Labour Party concluding screening of its aspirants. Promises to be a very interesting contest indeed, as they get ready for that governorship election in Edo State.
Business is happening this morning as usual, and the subject of conversation this morning is still talking about the commodities market, X-raying burning economic issues. There's going to be a guest there. And then the CBN is also talking about the constitution of the Monetary Policy Committee members and what's that going to be all about. Find out the details at the top of the next hour, and that is 10 o'clock. Let's look at some of the dailies now, Chamberlain, shall we?
All right, let's take you through some of the dailies, and we'll start with Nigerian Tribune this morning. Now, this headline, you could almost wake up the dead. Look at that. It's coming from the Sultan. He categorically says here, Nigeria sitting on keg of gunpowder, ascribed to the Sultan. Not what anybody wants to hear, but it is what it is this morning here today. It says, Nigerians are agitated, hungry, angry. Take immediate measures against current hardship, Khan tells FG. Overhaul Nigeria's security architecture, NBA tells Tinubu on Tribune.
And next we're looking at the Vanguard newspaper. Bandits now rape our women, Zamfara indigene laments, and that is one of the biggest stories there. Everyone talking about insecurity in the country and what can be done to make people feel a lot safer and make sure that we're able to carry out our activities and actually thrive in our country. But worrisome headline there from the Vanguard newspaper. Bandits now rape our women, Zamfara indigene laments, and that is from the front page of the Vanguard newspaper.
I'm with the Nigerian Observer this morning as my first pick, and look at that story. Troubling, isn't it? Or rather concerning, whichever way you look at it. FG must stop subsidy on electricity. That's according to the power minister. What does all of that mean? Well, the writer says state governments to be allowed to generate supply power. Well, that, of course, is part of what the latest constitutional review has said. But how far will that achieve anything? I guess we'll see. That's the lead story of the Nigerian Observer today.
How about a look at the blueprint? FG on food security is the theme, and the lead story on that same front page reads, there you go, needing Nigerians to get 42,000 metric tons of grains. So if you ask you anything, just so we know, just say.
And looking at this headline from This Nigeria, 45-man committee to amend the 1999 Constitution. You would want to read more on that on page 4 of This Day newspaper this morning.
News on the front page of Business Day today. It's good news, I dare say. Exciting times for Nigerian cocoa exporters as prices soar. That's good news part one. What I'm looking forward to, guys, is when I will hear, okay, we're only exporting 30% of our cocoa and we're processing the rest of it, adding value here in Nigeria. Hey, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the lead story of the Business Day newspaper today.
Well, look at the Daily Times today. Sultan laments mass poverty, hunger in northern Nigeria. Just phrasing it differently, but as highlighted by some of the other dailies here today with Daily Times.
And from the Nigerian News Direct, food palliatives. Federal government to distribute 42,000 metric tons of grains to Nigerians, cultivate 120,000 hectares of land. More on that from page 2 of Nigerian News Direct.
New Telegraph is joining some other papers, I guess, this morning. Look at what you have on the front page. Over 60 reps sign to return Nigeria to a parliamentary system of government by 2031, says presidential wasteful retard development. That story is on page 2. Tall talk, wouldn't you say? That's the lead story of the New Telegraph today.
Interesting or what? Well, have a look at The Guardian. Forex crisis, pushes petrol subsidy to 907.5 billion naira monthly, The Guardian reports today.
And from Leadership newspaper, Northern leaders worried over state of the nation. More on that on page 4 of Leadership. Northern leaders worried over the state of the nation.
The Daily Independent newspaper today, and it's very interesting what you'll find. It's also, of course, concerned. Everyone is concerned about the insecurity issue. NBA writes Tinubu over insecurity, says Nigeria under siege. And look at the writer. Worried bloodshed now daily occurrence, sending fear to citizens. That story continues on the inside pages. That's the lead story of the Daily Independent today.
All right, so as we've, a number of things stick out, of course, to a lot of people today. The Guardian, what is not the big story, which is equally important, troops bust illegal weapons factory in Plateau. Now, we've said time and again on the program, when this crisis about whatever name anyone calls it, hammers, headers, whatever it is, when those outrageous killings go on in that fashion, not just in Plateau, but in different parts of the country, at different people, and the people don't see certain persons being arrested and prosecuted. When the people feel helpless, when they feel they've got their backs against the wall, they can only help themselves in whatever way they think. You know what they say about when he that is down needs fear no fall. And a very important point wherein security architecture in this country. Look, we have said as much and we'll keep saying as much, but the people also look to see what is being done. Now, this factory that is being busted here questions if we feel we can keep policing the country centrally and get a better result. If security agencies think they've done their best and the people don't see that they're getting justice, they feel certain people are getting away with murder, these kind of things will always come up. If they feel our political leadership is playing the ostrich time and again, these kind of things will happen. If we think that, yesterday we talked about the stats from survey where they said 6.5 million illegal weapons are in the country by that survey. It was no joke. Now, this is one that they may have busted. What about the ones that they still in operation and they've not seen? So we do know that we've got a challenge, and hunger, anger, don't help anything. And that also tells us political leadership in this country, across board, they need to know that it's just time for them to do the right things. Data, the right data, and as we always say here, we can't politicize all of that. If we don't, it's either we get it right or not. If we want to be holding to what? Ethnicity, tribe, religion, we can only wish ourselves good luck. Because if we don't get it right, we might as well know the results.
It actually ties to one of the stories that stands out for me. In fact, we're seeing that story in a lot of the papers this morning. Nigeria sitting on a keg of gunpowder. It has a lot to the security situation and the fact that a lot of people are dissatisfied with governance and standard of living and wanting to be able to get results immediately. And that's something that a lot of engagements are happening. I know the Sultan is worried, but northern leaders are worried, and so is the rest of the country. We are all worried about the state of the country. And, you know, justice has to be seen to be done. You can't just say justice is being done, or you can't say we're just working on things. People need to see and feel it tangibly. If not, they may be correct. We just may be sitting on a keg of gunpowder, and that is not a safe place to be at all.
Well, my take this morning is similar because I'm actually spoiled for choice on the front pages this morning. But let me sit with the one on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper. It's on the top right corner. It's at the top right corner of the Vanguard newspaper this morning, where I think it's one of the monarchs, the northern leaders, monarchs are telling the president, look, we can no longer pacify our subjects. Northern monarchs tell Tinubu all about the hardship in the land. You know, they are addressing the president. How about the governors? How about the local government administrations? What are they doing? Or are they just seat warmers? Are they just there just to tick the box and say, okay, we are in office now, everything is just the way it is? I reference Chamberlain and Caleb, the comments of the governor of Niger State saying we're going to prioritize the welfare of our people. Maybe of the other governors are saying that, but unless those rhetorics are coming out as well, believe me, the people are still going to continue to point at the federal government. The federal government is they're just like supervisors. The land upon which agriculture will be cultivated, where the land will be cultivated, poultry and everything will happen, they are in the states. What are the state governments doing? What are the state governments saying? How are they intervening in the affairs of their people? That's equally important here. It is good that the federal government is aware of its own responsibilities and keeps saying, we hear you and everything. Largely, I dare say that the federal government at that level will probably be dealing with macroeconomic issues. I would say that the microeconomic issues, micro, small, and medium enterprises and all, they are in the states. What are the governors doing to ensure that the needful is done to ameliorate the sufferings, the hardship that the people are feeling? Let's begin to hear you as well, dear governors of 36 states of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Back to you, Chamberlain.
All right, then, so there you go. That wraps it up. But look at some of the dailies here this morning. But just give us a moment. We will be back with some of these items on the front page. But don't forget, you can also get your voices to hear. So just send us an email. We'll be glad. Or tweet at us. We'll be glad to hear from you. We're back in just a moment. Stay on with us.
Imagine lovely meals you can cook with these ingredients. You spend heavily, but no guarantee of a tasty meal. Not making a right choice of seasoning cube can ruin your meal, money, and confidence. For a tasty meal, do not compromise. Choose Gold.
Use Terra Gold for the rich, consistent taste your loved ones crave for. Good for soups, stews, and jollof. Terra Gold. One cube, endless possibilities.
Welcome to the future of gold mining with Japol Gold and Ventures PLC, where vision meets innovation. We have a bold vision to become a major player in gold, copper, and lithium mining production and refining globally, with a commitment to investing over $600 million within the next 5 years. With continuous exploration of our strategic mines in Nigeria and other countries in the world, targeting production and measured reserve of at least 30 million ounces of gold by 2028, with a world-class gold refinery. Having already secured about 650,000 ounces of gold, presently worth about $1.3 billion in one of our gold mines, we shall scale up to 100 million ounces of gold in reserve and production on or before the year 2033. Japaul Gold, a new dawn shaping the future of minerals mining in Nigeria and other parts of the world. Japaul, partnering for results.
TerraQ, unwrap joy, unleash taste.
Kana da abubuwa da yawa yau. Ovaltine kyakkyawan zaɓi domin yara masu basira.
In a world hungry for goodness, with a splash of golden Terra oil, a mom can transform a frown into a smile. Make a lunch hour a happy hour. Change no thanks into yes please. Provide care when our nearest and dearest needs it most. And resolve family feuds without blowing a whistle. Providing tasty, nourishing family meals is all that matters. The world needs moms because where there are moms, there is hope, happiness, and love. Golden Terra Oil, for pure love.
We are also resuscitating the abandoned 26 small and medium-sized hydro plants across the country with solar hybridization. This will adopt embedded power model with connectivity to the regional discos network. This is so easy. It doesn't have to go through the national grid. We have small dams with 10 megawatts, 6 megawatts, 1 megawatt across. We have one in Oyo State, Ikere Gorge Dam. We have one in Ogun State, Oyo, and we have across Nigeria. If we rehabilitate this, we are going to be supplying additional power to the states. And they don't need to go to the national grid on the 330 or 132 kV lines. They will be on the 33 kV line within the distribution network of the states. And this will be backup power. Then we are completing the 20 megawatt wind solar hybrid power plant in Katsina State. We have completed the 10 megawatts wind. We are now hybridizing it with a solar of another 10 megawatts. Once we complete that, that's another 20 megawatts coming from Katsina State. And we are completing the infrastructure required for complete evacuation of there is a 30 megawatt Gurara Dam power plant, which has been there for years. It was abandoned. Now we have a vendor that is ready to invest in the infrastructure and evacuate the entire 30 megawatts of hydro.
All right, welcome back. So yes, indeed, we'll go ahead and talk about that scenario, about the power sector from, as you may have seen there. We're joined now by Murtala Ali, who is a former Minister of State for Power. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today, sir.
Morning.
Okay, so but before we delve into power, which is where you served at the time, let's get your perspective on some of these narratives which we focus on over time, not just this week, but over time, about the state of this country, the policies that are being executed out there. In fact, only recent commentary talking about how we got here, the role the previous government played. So it's almost unending. But at the moment, the rising cost of living worries anyone who's everyone. So could you tell us, what do you think of how things are turning out at the moment?
Well, I think the government is a collective responsibility. Government, both at national and subnational level, must give attention to that. All other stakeholders, like traditional institutions, civil society, must face them. Because the challenges are enormous.
But in terms of what leadership has done over the years, do you think that perchance current leadership, maybe even in the future, we might learn lessons so that we could perhaps do things differently and see how we could drill down to focusing on leadership in the real sense of the word and not perhaps pandering to things that don't even drive us forward? Oh, okay. I think the connection is frozen at the moment. We're trying to sort that out. We're just trying to highlight some of the comments coming through where the Sultan is quoted to have said Nigeria is sitting on the keg of gunpowder. Different groups, different regions have complained about how they think things are not going on well. But if you go down memory lane at this point in time, is that likely to change how we clamor for the kinds of people who we vote into power? Is that likely to change how we perceive politics and governance? Is that likely to change anything? So who knows? Because this comment, I remember the Sultan made similar narratives, even in the last government, how he kept on warning about security particularly. He wanted us to do things differently at the point. But if you ask him now, he might just say that it appeared as though he fell on deaf ears at the time. But I know those in government at the point too will tell you, the president at the time did a fantastic job. It's Adesina's book. We can forget that one. So all of these things, well, in a manner of speaking, may just all add up.
I mean, what's worrisome is the fact that there's a dynamic to our population. So our country keeps changing every single month. And the things that are necessary to ensure that this is contained, because, if you don't learn from the past, you will get into a lot of trouble. And that's why people like the Sultan have been complaining. It's not just him. Everyone across the country have been complaining about the situation of things when it comes to security, when it comes to the economy. And we have a massive youth population. We don't want a situation where we have a country where people don't believe things work. And we're gradually heading there. So it's critical that the right things are done right now, especially in that power sector. Especially in the power sector.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely a lot of bright spots in the sense that the quality of several individuals in this country, the length and breadth of this country has fantastic, brilliant people wherever you turn in this country. But then we now need to, as a nation, see how do we get these kinds of people to play very fantastic roles so that we can all indeed see that, wow, this quality of people are people that we can actually be proud of in this country. So, but of course, you know what they say about a lot of things rising and falling on leadership. I reminded us about that one yesterday. So that's why when some of these things don't go the way ought to, you'd always look to leadership from the state to the federal to, how about local government and the state assembly? So
because it doesn't just stop at the federal level. This is something that has to trickle down all the way. The accountability of governance. I think we're seeing a lot of people wanting to see accountability even at local levels, and that's a conversation I know that's going to be happening in a few days' time. Mm-hmm. But in that electricity sector, to be very honest, watching the minister yesterday and reading up on these figures that he's given us, how did this happen? How did we get to where, we're indebted to the tune of 1.3 trillion naira to Gencos and $1.3 billion owed to legacy for the gas companies. And we're trying to look at a youthful population that we're trying to build, people who are trying to become entrepreneurial. It's impossible for you to grow your business with these figures on ground. And that's accountability is one that has to be, ensured. I want to wonder what Ayo thinks about this situation, especially when it comes to the power sector, Ayo.
Sticking with the power sector, one of the first things that comes to mind, Chamberlain and Kayla, what happened to the rural electrification program? Is that also factored into the 1.3 trillion that the minister mentioned, or is that one already what you call a sunk cost? How far with that one as well? Because if what we understand, and with resources from various multilateral organizations, I think at some point even the AFDB was part of the funders of the rural electrification project of the federal government of Nigeria. I'm not sure. That needs to be double checked, but I think the AFDB was one of those funders as well. And so some of the resources that came into the power sector for funding electricity in Nigeria from the federal government, going by the provisions of the Constitution previously, is that electricity supply is the responsibility of the federal government, granted. And then we have that rural electrification program, which is not supposed to be something on the grid as it is now. It is something that's supposed to be alternative power generated, solar and the like. So what happened to that one on the one hand? And then, it was back in the first 4 years or first 8 years of this republic we're in, that the Lagos state government at the time initiated the idea, look, why don't we as states have the capacity to generate our own electricity? It's a conversation to be had with the former minister that I want to talk about. And then there are several other issues to raise. I'm glad you mentioned the issue of local governments, Chamberlain, because when states begin to generate electricity for themselves, what's going to happen to border communities? In our environment, in our location here in Lagos, for instance, on the other side of the road is Ogun State. Here where we are is Lagos State. So what will happen to those kinds of areas? What kind of collaborations are going to be happening to ensure that some people are not shortchanged simply because they don't belong to a particular part of a particular town? Ife and Modakeke, standard case as well, where people are quarreling simply because they have a street that divides one state. What's going to happen to those communities? Those are conversations to be had as well. But as far as electricity is concerned, Kayla, I'm glad you mentioned the young population. These guys have gone from analog to digital. In fact, some of them are born with digital devices in their hands. Are we factoring them in? Are we building a future for them, or we are trying to catch up with the past that we have lost? Dear Minister, and dear anyone who is in government doing these things, let's also factor some of those issues in as well, Chamberlain and Kayla.
So we'll continue our conversation in just a moment, so don't go away.
Channels TV podcast and get all the trending stories. Simply log on to channelstv.com. Click on podcast, select the program of your choice, and listen. Our podcast is available on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Tap the expertise you trust. Touch the stories that touch you. Anytime, anywhere. Our website, channelstv.com, has more information on our top stories and others. Subscribe and watch Channels Television's live stream on YouTube and other social media platforms using your mobile device browser, or download the Channels TV app for Android and iOS devices from their respective stores. You can also watch us via your smart TV platforms on Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. Channels Television, ubiquitous.
Welcome back. Well, yes, indeed. Let's go back to Murtala Aliyu, former Minister of State for Power. Yes, so we actually didn't get to hear your perspective on the challenges and how the policies, the kind of effect they're having on this country concerning the rising cost of living. So go ahead, if you don't mind, and give us your perspective on the matter.
Well, like I said, they are complex issues. You know, they
appears to be one of those days, but we'll sort that out and get him back and have his perspective on the power sector, which is what we're going to do in not distant time. So just keeps, raising back and forth, but we'll address all of that. But we'll also be flipping as well to some other key persons in the power sector who also have played in that system, because several of them put their heads together to see the comments from the Minister of Power, the substantive Minister of Power, wherein the question of subsidy, how indebted we are to the GENCOs, how he thinks the discos should better step up. If they don't perform, they have their licenses revoked. So all of those add to whether or not Nigerians should be worried. Are we going to, I think they say, well, look, we'll pay more, but we don't know how much more that's going to be, which is what nobody wants to pay more these days. But if you get out there, the prices are just going over the roof. But let's just flip over to Professor Yemi Oke. You know him, also an academic in that sector as well. He joins us virtually too. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program, Prof.
And others, good morning. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yes, indeed. So the comments from the Minister of Power yesterday has got a lot of people thinking. Businesses, too, will be thinking, look, what is going on? And the question about him saying, look, at some point, the country cannot keep paying the subsidy, even though many wonder if we had it at all, to what extent. And so if this is, first of all, give us your impression of what you made of. I know you said some things about that disco previously, but now his view on the power sector and subsidy Does it fit into what you said all the while?
Absolutely, Chamberlain, and we are getting to a point in this country when we need to also look at ourselves, eyeball to eyeball, and tell ourselves bitter, simple truth. I, for one, in another station, we argued this same issue as to the subsidy in the power sector, and I said the entirety of the energy sector is over-subsidized. We just had the needful removal of the petroleum subsidy. A lot of Nigerians were not aware that we have a lot of subsidies structured in the power sector. And my challenge with the power sector was because what we now subsidizing in the power sector was absolute failure and darkness. In the old law, Electric Power Sector Reform Act, there was something called PICA, Power Consumer Assistance Fund. That was this designated pool of funds that was there or supposed to be there to mitigate the hardship of needful adjustment upwards in electricity tariffs for poor Nigerians. The same PICA structure is also replicated in the Electricity Act of 2023. But as we speak, we don't have PICA in place. So the poor are not being subsidized as intended by the law. But the subsidy we have in the power sector has been going into the wrong hands because we've been subsidizing failures and inefficiencies. The subsidy comes in different ways in the power sector by guarantees and at the level of Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading Company. MBOT is a special purpose vehicle put in place to create a kind of a stability in the system for Nigerians to have electricity. It gives an assurance to the generators, GENCOs, that whatever is generated will be paid for. So the shortfalls in the generation is being paid for by the federal government. And there is no incentive for the GENCOs and the DISCOs to get effective and efficient in their cost management. So government is now spending a lot of money to reduce their losses. And there was no incentive for them to get smart in the way they manage their overheads and other operational expenses. So what government has been doing has been to subsidize those who ought not to get subsidies. Nigerians have always been in darkness. So government has been subsidizing darkness in a technical sense. And we said, this can't continue. Let's know where we are. And the starting point is to ensure Nigerians are metered so that when you are going to jack up tariffs slightly, reasonably, it must be that Nigerians will only pay for services rendered and they will not pay for darkness. They will pay for actual electricity that is consumed and they will not pay for darkness. And I've always said that it is criminal to let Nigerians pay for electricity not consumed. It's also illegal for Nigerians to consume electricity and not pay. But once they meter, they can control their consumption pattern. If you are going to increase it from 1 naira to 2 naira, then I've been using 3 hours of electricity. Then I can modulate my usage from 2 hours to 1 hour of electricity that I can afford. But you can now increase tariffs and force it down the throat of Nigerians through estimated billing and other illegal or shrouded kind of billing structures that we've had. So we need to get things done properly in the power sector, in the energy sector generally. The entire value chain is in shambles. The regulatory framework is bad. The regulator has not been effective, and we've had issues and we're solving those issues. And now we should get the right things done. I don't see major impact on Nigerians really, because they've never had light anyway. So if they are removing subsidy in electricity, it means they will continue to have their diesel and petrol options, and as well as inverters and solars and other options, and pay for actual electricity that is consumed by them. So the subsidy should go.
I want to get your thoughts, sir. Can you hear me, sir? I want to be able to get your thoughts on a few of the things that you've mentioned. You did talk right now about the sector being over-subsidized, and you said the subsidies are going into the wrong hands. How are they going? In what hands? What are you alleging is going on here? And for many people who've listened to you right now, what we have heard is inevitably, if we want this to work, there has to be an increase in the price that we're paying for electricity. But we'll get to that shortly. First of all, your thoughts on, you're saying these subsidies going into the wrong hands. What hands are these?
Let me now break it down. In other countries where you have subsidies go directly to consumers. And even in the UK next door, once you get your utility bills, you see the component of your consumption that is actually paid for by the British government. So the subsidy goes to the consumers. But in the case of Nigeria, we are subsidizing efficiency because subsidy is at the level of production. And at the level of production, we have a lot of waste. But what actually gets consumed by Nigerians has no subsidy. And I use an example of a yam. If you want to put plates of yam on the table of Nigerians, you subsidize the yams per plate as to actual consumption, not the tubers. Because in the tubers, you're going to have a lot of waste. So meaning actual consumption is what ought to be subsidized. Generation and distribution should not be that subsidized because it's going to distort the system. We're not going to have an accurate picture of cost per unit of megawatts or kilowatts. Because at the level at which the subsidies are being given, essentially for generation, a lot of humongous, wasteful expenses, unjustifiable expenses have been put and built into that structure. And those are not sustainable. If you're going to be a player in the sector, you must know what you are getting into. And if you're going to be Nigerians, let government now assist Nigerians directly as anticipated in the PCAF structure. But unfortunately, we don't even have the PCAF in place. It's never been operationalized. Not for
it's
once.
About something that the minister mentioned. He said, of course,
we've had a lot of challenges.
Can you hear me, sir? So Nigeria, according to the minister, we cannot continue to pay these subsidies on electricity. These monies that are being owed, how do we tie that to actually having an effective tariff model, which the minister is clamoring for? Is that something that can be done with the indices on ground?
It's something that can and should be done. When there was the initial proposal or proposition was to have cost-reflective tariff. As industry players, we kicked against cost-reflective tariff because it means whatever wasteful cost those megawatts or kilowatts are generated or produced, government is putting money.
Okay.
That creates an incentive for waste on the part of those who are generating. And that is why you see a lot of, they call it aggregate transmission and collection losses. I don't want to go technical now because Nigerians really want the A, B, or B to have a clear understanding. Meaning, what the bill or the tariff that will be issued to Nigerians is a question of the entirety of the cost of generating that electricity, and which includes how much they paid for gas, if it's hydro, or whatever feeding structure or whatever basis.
Right.
Whatever form the basis of the generation. Let me put it in that layman's language.
So, Prof, just hang on a minute. Pardon me to jump in now. Let's also try and get Mr. Aliyu, the former Minister of Power, Minister of State for Power, who also joins us virtually. So, apologies for that back and forth. These connections can be challenging sometimes, I tell you. So, go ahead and give us your perspective on this matter, because it's got a lot of people thinking, look, subsidy, do we have the proper framework? Does it mean we'll experience the kind of scenario we're experiencing with the petrol sector if subsidy goes in the power sector? What do you think?
This most of the conversation because of this networks issue. The issue of subsidy, there is no government in the world that doesn't subsidize citizens, either in agriculture, in energy, whatever it is. I think that government should prepare to cushion some of those things and ensure that the system works. with time, then the subsidy can be gradually removed. But certainly, there's no way government can subsidize energy. There's no way government can subsidize agriculture. But I think the structure of subsidy or subsidizing is important.
Okay, so if you could talk to us, did this conversation come up while you were serving, and what were the kind of responses that came through, if it did?
Let me get you again.
This question about removing subsidy for the power sector, did it come up while you were a minister? And if it did, what kind of conversations held?
Yes, it did, of course, because, if you look at the history of the power generation in this country, it was initially to cushion, or rather to all the colonial machinery to make them function. And so the initial off-takers of power were heavily subsidized by governments. And again, the market was narrow or small. And so people had this feeling that energy or power is like some dividend of democracy. And so with time, it's just now that people are realizing it's a commodity that should be purchased and used. And so this gradual education of people to realize that energy, like every other thing consumed, should be paid for. So the conversation was on, and it was gradually, applied. As you are withdrawing the subsidy, people are becoming. I think the gentleman that spoke earlier on was talking about losses. He said he wanted to go technical. There was so much commercial loss that government had to be subsidizing these companies. Now that we have privatized, and the generation aspect and the concentrate on subsidy around the distribution aspect, not in generation. I think the generators can, as long as they produce and sell, I think the subsidy there will not be an issue like it is in the distribution sector, where still there is weakness in the infrastructure, distribution infrastructure. There's also a weakness in the commercial dimension to the whole thing. Still, people are not collecting, or rather, people are not paying in quite a number of locations in the country.
So I want to be able to get your thoughts on something you just mentioned right now, which is where the subsidies should be going, just so we can understand it. To the man who spoke earlier, Prof, who spoke earlier, was talking about the fact that those subsidies should go straight to the consumer. What are your thoughts on that? So I think you mentioned it a little bit right now while you were speaking, just so we can get an explanation of what you mean by where the subsidies should be going directly to.
This point is where the subsidies should concentrate. First of all, one of the mistakes that was made was that I don't know whether there was due diligence before those discourses were disposed of. The discourse need to make substantial investments to strengthen the distribution network, and then give quality power, and then also strengthen their commercial capability, able to collect, their money. So if those things are addressed, it will reduce the pressure on the subsidy that government will give. But for as long as that's not done, the consumer will have to pay more. Those actually paying will pay more because there are some that are not paying. And also the companies, like you said recently, they overcharge some people because they don't have the digital meters. So I think they need to sit down and review the whole sector, logically, and see how and what area this intervention and so on. For investments, government will still have to invest in this sector, and rather to the private sector. The private sector would certainly, so any intervention by government is actually a subsidy.
Well, Mr. Liu, one question comes to my mind, beyond the whole conversation around subsidy and all, is the issue of decentralization of the power sector, as the minister mentioned, and talking about the states now having the power or the capacity to generate power and distribute to their people as well. How workable is that, in your own opinion? Do all the states have the capacity to generate and distribute by themselves?
You see, as long as it will be commercially done, it's okay. We have a lot of opportunities. I heard the minister talking about the dams in the country. Yes, there are small dams. Here in the north, the Inco Dam is generating about 38 megawatts. the Kashimbila in Taraba, the Talawa and so on are producing, but it's not just dams. You see, we have enormous capacity in solar. If you look at the technology now that's been developed, we have huge land mass and large space. We can put a huge power solar infrastructure and get more supply from there. So the issue is states can start producing, but they shouldn't do it for God's sake as state governments. They should encourage investors to come to do that so that the right things are done. But if they come and do it as state governments, we'll still fall back to the same problem that we're in now.
These problems. I'm glad you mentioned that, because if we don't understand, because some governors might be interested and not even understand the hurdles they have to cross in order to achieve the desired objectives of generating, distributing, and transmitting powers by themselves.
The funny thing is that the citizens have to understand that the energy sector is not a dividend of democracy. It's a consumable item that people should buy and use. Even the industry in the use of energy in this country, if people pay, they'll be able to be more disciplined, and then we'll be able to reduce the exposure. So governments should not directly get involved and start putting state funds into generating or distributing power. They should get the private sector, but they should just make the environment, friendly, so that where there's an intervention, a requirement for intervention, they should intervene at that level.
Okay, I see a kind of a transition necessary, transiting from what we have now to this aspiration that the government is talking about now. But there are those who would say, and you have been in the saddle before, that the power sector as currently structured is very, very complex and convoluted. How do you see the transition from the centralized to a decentralized system, the NBEDs, the NERCs? How do you see them performing or fitting into the new proposed structure?
This process started long ago. It's getting to 20 years now that the process is on. Ordinarily, by now, we should have gotten it right. It's not something that, we have to look at the NBEDs, the regulatory aspects, and so on. There are areas that actually require this power in large quantity, for industrial purposes, for other commercial use, and so on. But let for now enhance. We can now move, just like we started, connecting the cities first before we started rural electrification and so on. Let the captive areas be the attention for now, and then we'll reduce pressure on the grid, and the grid can now decide in those areas. So if state governments are going to go into this, please let them encourage this captive arrangement where power will go directly to the requirement source. I'll give an example. The Datunko Dam is supposed to give about 35 to 40 megawatts. Ashaka Cement at that time wanted 22 megawatts. So if that's already a viable off-taker. And then the rest can now go into the grid.
Well, Mr. Ali, I wanted to be able to talk to you a bit about, these monies being owed. Everyone is talking about the correlation between the issues in the power sector and the inability of many Nigerians to be able to run businesses in the country. Is that something that worries you? And then talk to us about these monies that are being owed. What next?
Which money are being owed? You mean being owed the electricity companies?
Yeah, so the minister said that we're indebted to the tune of 1.3 trillion naira to Gencos and $1.3 billion owed to Legacy for the gas companies.
You see, the composition, or rather the mix that we have. If we are generating power through gas, we know that you are not getting gas free. You are going to pay for gas. If you are generating with the hydro, the moment you put the infrastructure. So I think it's a mix. At the beginning of privatization, companies that were buying the generating company, the GenCos, were supposed to be picking mix between, or rather, a combination of hydros and the gas plants, so as to balance their portfolio, so that the price cannot be the pricing can be fair on the consumer. Now, that was the initial arrangement. Now, people coming to set up their plants will do that commercially. If you are in a state where you can get solar, the investment would be at the initial level. So that's the part. But the issue of debts, like I said, people are not used to paying. And most of the culprits there actually are the institutions, not the individuals. You just heard recently when the distribution companies were asked to refund money to consumers that they overcharged, and the government is even sanctioning them and getting 10% of that. So the major culprits actually are the institutional bodies, like the military, like ministries, like the universities, and so on, that take these powers in bulk and pay over a period of time. So I think that's what should be addressed, and engage those major consumers, discuss with them, and spread over how the money can be recovered. But the money should be recovered.
All right. Just also, Prof, just 30, 40 seconds, if you can. As things stand today, do we have the framework to remove subsidy for this sector? Prof, can you unmute?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we are supposed to have a framework, but the framework is not being operationalized, and that's the challenge that we have. We have PCAF that was in the old law. We never put it into use. Now we have our consumer assistance from the new electricity act that's not being used. Instead of putting resources in that to subsidize, we've been subsidizing the big players. And as the former minister rightly mentioned, everything is in a mess. And even the privatization itself is what got us to where we are. And most of those debts are not debts that should be in the books of the federal government, if properly scrutinized. I'm sure there'll be other glory pictures that will be revealed. Those are not just variable debts, and those debts should be probed.
All right, Professor Emeka, thank you very much indeed for your time this morning, as well as Murtala Aliyu, former Minister of State for Power. Thank you for your time as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we know without power there can be no business, no good business, but we do have business news coming up next with Ini John Mekwa.
That's true, Chamberlain. Without power, there can be no business. Without business, no economy. So power is obviously very important, and we do appreciate that conversation. Even on our morning brief, I mean, this had to be tackled also because even the United Kingdom has said that Nigeria seems to be the poorest when it comes to power accessibility by the population. And so if you have a huge number of the population unable to access power, where does business go to? If we keep talking about we want to stop importation, what power do you use to produce what you're going to consume? So it's a very, very important topic, talking about power there. But you're welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. I'm Ini John Mekwa. And yes, we're starting from the global space as usual. And we're beginning with some good news, from the Nigerian front. We see that according to reports now, Nigerian farmers and exporters of cocoa are reaping big as global cocoa prices hit record high. And that's, well, thanks to the steep Naira devaluation that's resulted in a sharp increase in the Naira income from the export of the beans. The cost of cocoa, which is the key ingredient for making chocolate has almost doubled since the start of the year, and quoted prices on the internal cocoa organization's website reach a new historic high of $5,874 per return in February. This is because bad weather has battered harvest in top West African growers, Ivory Coast and Ghana, causing more attention to be given to Nigeria and giving them obviously more profits. Locally, prices are also surging as the Naira continues that free fall. We saw that yesterday. In spite of the intervention of the Central Bank of Nigeria, it still hit about 1,500 in the official market. We hope to stay on this and find out, because the farmers would tell you that's talking about cocoa, is this profit really getting down to them? Join us tomorrow on Business Incorporated 1 p.m. and we'll get that conversation for you. And then, of course, the conversation that has been making the rounds, you just heard right there, a bid to cut subsidy on electricity in the country. The Minister of Power, Mr. Adebayo Adelabu, wants this goes unbundled on a state-by-state basis to optimize efficiency and increase accountability and transparency to the consumers, as well as help states to generate power independently. And we know just last week, Friday, President Bola Tinubu had signed that reformed act into law. However, that takes care more of host communities for generating companies for electricity. Perhaps that will also contribute to it. But speaking to stakeholders in the power sector, they will tell you that a major challenge remains the supply of gas. So we need to deal with the basics if we really want this to be solved. So we can talk about that and a whole lot, because obviously power affects the commodity space, commodity supply, just as Chamberlain said when I was coming on. So let's delve into the commodity space now with senior economist with financial services company, Dumebi Oluwole. She joins us. Hi, Dumebi.
Hi, Amy. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's start with this power. The heat these days is climate change.
Yes.
And then the power, I don't know, in your area, how's the supply?
To be honest, it's not good. It's not good. I don't really know what's happening, but power is one of the big issues. Even when you go to the markets, maybe you're trying to get frozen foods, you see that their stock is probably already defrosted and things like that. So the power issue is one big problem that clearly the government needs to significantly address, simply because it's not only even affecting households, but now also affecting the productivity of businesses. And remember that the role of the government is to create an enabling environment for businesses to thrive. If businesses are not thriving, output will decline, and they will be unable to employ more people. That way, we're seeing consumer disposable income, which is already being eroded by inflation, erode even further, because more people will not have the income equipped for them, simply because there are no jobs available. So yeah, it's a very big vicious cycle that clearly needs to be significantly addressed.
And I mean, I don't know if it's a recognition of being known in the world as the poorest when it comes to accessing.
Yes.
I mean, it's really sad, and we are the giant of Africa. I think South Africa just joined us, and they are not used to generator and all of that. We're used to it, but even the price of petrol, diesel,
everything is up.
You can't run away from it.
So to be honest, what this simply has pointed to is the fact that when policies happen or when there's a huge shock to the economy, not only consumers are affected. So right now we're seeing the cost of living increase, and also the cost of doing business significantly increase as well. And unfortunately, consumers are receiving a double whammy, because once the cost of production or cost of doing business increases, it trickles down, or producers pass down this burden in the form of higher prices to consumers, and so consumers are being battered from the already significant increase in the cost of living, followed by an additional increase in in the price of commodities. But to be fair, I think that the issues with the power sector are quite multifaceted, right? You mentioned something about unbundling. I'm not an energy expert, but I do know that the capacity in Nigeria, the energy that we actually have, our generation capacity, is pretty high and enough to, somewhat provide enough electricity for Nigeria. If you're aware, I'm pretty sure you already know that we do export some of our electricity. So the issue is not that we do not have the electricity. The problem is our transmission capacity, our transmission infrastructure is dilapidated, is inadequate to actually feed the entire nation. And then so we have excess power that we're exporting to, generate revenue, because the power cannot go to waste. And then we're unable to service.
Yes, so I think that captures it, because a couple of days ago, I spoke to Mr. George Etomi. Yes. He's the chairman of West Power and Gas. Mm-hmm. And apart from the need for gas, mm-hmm. which we say we are wasting, it's the infrastructure to turn that gas into what we need
exactly.
for power.
Exactly.
It's such an irony.
So it brings me to something I've been saying of recent, that governance might not be so straightforward, but it has a lot of things to do with common sense. Now, we already know that the issue is, we already know that the core of it all is to actually drive productivity. And we know that the problem with Nigeria's power sector is that the infrastructure is not available. And if infrastructure is not available, productivity cannot be achieved. So if our general goal, if our overall goal is to achieve productivity, it does make sense to focus on addressing the issues that are affecting the sector. And what is truly affecting the transmission capacity right now is the infrastructure. So why not channel resources to that particular problem? So when we do address that, if there are still now, recurring issues, we can now start troubleshooting to say, okay, this is where else, problems are coming from. But the key thing here is we need to focus on achieving productivity, or driving towards achieving productivity in Nigeria. And this not only cuts across the power sector, but across everything: the agricultural sector, the manufacturing sector, the real estate sector, the construction sector. The key issue is that we're not producing enough. And why are we not producing enough? The key things that businesses need to thrive is not available for them.
And that's infrastructure.
Exactly.
Well, anyways, that was just what affects us.
Yes.
Now, what affects the whole nation? We're talking about MPC. We've started seeing names of proposed individuals for the MPC, that's the Monetary Policy Committee, by the Central Bank. There's a meeting that is supposed to hold on the 26th and 27th. And I remember I spoke to the chief executive of FDC some time ago, and I asked him, because I already heard that the Central Bank governor was going to change members, and he said, when you look at the time frame, it doesn't look like something that can be achieved. So now we're waiting for the Senate's approval for some of these individuals, and the meeting is on the 26th, 27th, and I'm wondering how that works.
I mean, to be very honest, I would say that Nigeria is on edge, and we're seeing this scramble amongst policymakers, and it's not sending a good signal to the market. This singular action is one of the reasons why the Naira did dip, simply because it's signaling to the market that there is crisis within, monetary policy makers, and it doesn't bode well for the entire market. So we're seeing a lot of speculation, we're seeing a lot of attacks on the Naira, we're seeing investor confidence dampen, because the meeting is practically next week, or I think next week.
No,
next 2 weeks.
26.
Yes, 26. Next 2 weeks, and we're just getting the members together. Meaning that the agenda is probably not yet set. We don't yet know how the CBN is going to address the issues. So the key thing here, basically, that I would focus more on is not on the members of the committee, but on what direction and what signal the Monetary Policy Committee is going to send to the market.
But I mean, the members, these are the individuals that will share the knowledge and experience for the direction of the meeting. These are the same individuals who do not know if they are going to be a part of the meeting on the 26th and 27th.
So I would say you're right in that, but then, you know, a lot more things feed into market sentiment and the eventual policy direction, right? And from everything that we've seen from the beginning of the year up until now, it is clear that the CBN is on a path of orthodoxy. It's also clear that the CBN is trying to be very direct in its approach to focusing on price stability. It's also very clear that the CBN is trying to do what it can to ensure that it keeps the naira, you know, in check and it reins in inflation. Now, how far they are going to go with these new members, the markets cannot say. I can't even say. But the key thing here is to look at the signals that the CBN has been able to give to the market since the beginning of the year up until now. It has tried to clear some of its backlog. It has been open with the auditing of the CBN's books. It's doing a lot to, you know, be transparent. The key thing now is they continue on this path. But like I did mention, not having your policy committee members 2 weeks to your meeting is a bad signal to the market, and we did see the naira take the hit for that. So I would say we just need that to be wrapped up as quickly as possible so that we can start focusing on the key issue, because the members right now are not the main problem. It is keeping inflation in check and keeping the exchange rate stable.
And these are the people who are making the decision.
I mean,
the policies are going to be made by them. You know, that's what we'll see at the end of the meeting.
Yes, you're right. But then again, I would say it's my
you're just trying to be optimistic.
Exactly. I would say it's my being an economist that's trying to, because really we are trying to not look at all of these things. We're trying to, let's focus on what the signal is and what exactly is happening. What are the fundamentals saying? And this is what what I said is what the fundamentals are saying. So we're trying to just breeze over that, even though it's not a good signal, but we're trying to look past it.
Okay, so we see here, that's for the MPC. Then we see Naira crashed yesterday. In spite of that huge intervention from the central bank, I think that was on Tuesday, you know, so perhaps these are some of those sentiments that, in spite of the lot efforts of the central bank, it seems it's not having the desired impact.
I mean, it's just simply what I said. The signaling, right, is extremely important. So when it comes to monetary policy, the directives are not just enough. It's also the signals that the policy authorities do send to the market. And we've seen this negative reaction simply because of, it's clear that there's no monetary policy committee yet, and we have a meeting in the next 2 weeks. So that's one of the reasons why the markets did react this way. But then again, you also have to consider the fact that, I think I did mention it here before, when it comes to intervention in the FX market in times of crisis like this, it's expected, but it cannot be staggered. So by staggered, I mean,
because the last time before this was September.
Exactly. So if we decide to have policy intervention, like FX interventions of maybe 200 million, I'm giving an example, a hypothetical example today, and tomorrow it's 15. The markets will jitter simply because there's uncertainty. We don't know if this is going to continue. We don't know how, so might as well
when the next tranche will come.
Is going to come. So might as well hold the dollars I have now so that, I do not get bitten. So some of those inconsistencies in interventions are one of the things that also feed into negative market sentiments like we're witnessing this period. And another thing to just also consider is the FX market, even though the CBN has done a lot of work to try and narrow the gap between all the exchange rates that we have, the important thing is, or rather what I'm trying to say is, we've seen this unification or convergence happen, but there's still a lot of underlying restrictions here and there. There's still a lot of, so the sentiments or the signals are not fully broad-based. So markets are still speculating on some certain restrictions that are somewhere, that are not probably out there in the open. We saw T-bill rates actually increase significantly, but that hasn't done so much to significantly, increase investor sentiment. And when you really look at it, you realize that the negative rates of return on investments are still very wide, right? So inflation is still very high. and these returns are pretty low. So,
and we're still having government intervening in rate. Customs duties, for instance, they had 5 times this year.
Exactly.
We're in the 2nd month of the year.
Exactly. And so that's why I'm saying that, you see, all of these restrictions and conflicting signals are what the market's pricing for the exchange rate.
All right, Dumebi, thank you so much. Well, we're counting down to MPC. We're watching the lawmakers, hope they can make our job easier and just approve these members. But I wonder what will happen if they say, oh, this member cannot be approved. Then go hunting for another member and come back again, you know.
I mean, we keep fingers crossed. We keep fingers crossed to see how that pans out.
All right, maybe thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right, now let's take a break. When we come back from the break, I'd love to talk about women because I'm a woman. Join us after break here on Business Morning.
There are places you would like to go. There are faces you would like to see.
My palm is bruised. It's a tiny scar, but it's very painful.
Too many exciting things happening all at once.
From time I've always loved playing the villain.
But you can't be everywhere. Guess what? Yes, we can. Your favorite lifestyle content lives here. Let us be your eyes and ears here on Entertainment News on Channels Television. Modern lifestyle requires a lot of energy, backed up by intense production processes, which impact the environment in more ways than one.
The world has realized that you cannot deal with climate change without looking at loss of biodiversity.
On Echo Africa, nature speaks and the discerning mind becomes champion of sustainable living.
One thing we want to do is to change public behavior around recycling.
Watch Echo Africa on Channels Television and find out what nature is saying. We live in an era of massive innovation, true ideas that impact every industry and society, cutting-edge technology that gives you a glimpse of the future, intuitive minds that meet the demand of a revolution of talent. The future of enterprise lies in the digital world. It's full of questions and yet solutions. Join us on Tech Trends as we bring you the finest blend of technology and the latest happenings in the tech space. Tech Trends, the tech edge you need.
You're welcome back. Now, let's talk about women in banking, to be precise. Now, a lot of things have happened. Of course, we're still mourning the loss of the CEO of Access Core, Dr. Herbert Wigwe. Our hearts go out to the family, and of course, we mourn him now. But following his passing, of course, we did have a replacement there, Ms. Bolaji Agbede, a versatile professional with over 27 years experience in human resources management, customer relationship management, and banking operations. She's proven a record of successful people in integration during mergers and acquisition, culture transformation, and execution of corporate strategies. She commenced a professional career in the banking sector in Guarantee Trust Bank, served in various capacities, including relationship manager and vault custodian. She diligently distinguished herself and swiftly rose from the grade of executive trainee in 1992 to manager in 2001, and she subsequently served as the chief executive officer of JKG Limited in 2003, a business consulting outfit. So she's just one. We have some other women who are also very active and leading when it comes to the banking sector. For instance, we do have for Fidelity, she's just, her tenure has just been extended for another 2 years. That's joining us right there. And also, we do have Mrs. Shola David Boha, ex-Stanbic CEO. We have Ms. Yemisi Edun, FCMB, and of course, some other women. We also have from Unity Bank also. So we see women taking on more leading roles in the banking sector. So we have their pictures there, Dr. Nneka, right there. Yesterday we had that news that our tenure has been extended to 2026. And then we have the CEO of Unity, we have for FCMB. And of course, I remember I had a conversation with Mrs. Shola David-Boha some time ago when she was the CEO of Stanbic. We celebrate this women and we talk about women in the banking sector. And joining me to have this conversation is Vida Echetabu. She's a consultant general for Fourth Avenue. Well, it's a woman thing right now. And we see women taking up major roles, leading roles in the banking sector. This is just a bit that we remember, just about 5 of them. What do women bring to the table? We've been talking about gender equality for a long time. So, if you really want true development, you have to include the women. What do they bring to the table?
You know, before I answer that question, it's interesting, you know, you brought in that aspect because next month is International Women's Day. And interestingly, the theme is inspiring inclusion, you know, which just goes into how we are making sure that ladies are now brought to the table. And in fact, if we don't bring us to the table, we're making a table of our own, you know. So in addition to the ability of ladies being able to multitask, you know, to be insightful, and, you know, we have that thing that is called the gut, you know, the guts, the instinct. It's quite keen, especially when it's been harnessed properly. So along with our regular brains, we're bringing in all sorts of, you know, value in terms of insight, perspective, you know, being able to read circumstances. It's an innate thing, which of course can be harnessed. And, you know, we bring a lot of that to the table. Yes.
But I mean, we've seen, for instance, Mrs. Shola David-Boha, she's been there. Now she's no longer there as Stanbic. Now we have, of course, the newest entrant, Ms. Agbede. Well, congratulations to her.
Yes.
Although the circumstances, you know, is sad. But what can we notice? And then we have Dr. Nneka, obviously her tenure just extended.
Yes, phenomenal.
And we know that for her, Dr. Nneka, we see a lot of attention from Fidelity on small businesses. Yes. I wonder if that's the touch of a woman. If we look at the trend, is there something we can notice as a trend coming from women who are leading?
Yes. Short answer, yes. And particularly with Dr. Nneka, I mean, we've tried to pay some attention to the performance of the bank, the trajectory, how they have made sure that they have carved a niche for themselves in the medium, small-scale enterprise, you know, niche of the financial sector, and they have made phenomenal strides. I mean, look at just even their general performance, profit before tax, you know, before, at the point of her ascension to that office was about just over 38 billion naira. And as at last year, this year to date, should be about 122 billion. So we're talking about close to quadrupling, you know, PBT, which is instructive. You know, we've seen them play strongly in the exports regulatory niche, again, which speaks to the SME space. And I can take it on good authority that they actually have some major plans for that space. They are building what we would call an SME village, a hub. And it's a massive project because anybody in leadership, whether it's governmental leadership, whether it's industry leadership, knows that SME space, that's the engine room of any economy.
So is that a woman's touch or is just a needed, necessary touch that any CEO would have taken?
I think that there is no exclusivity to both. I think that there is both the female touch and a strategic touch. You know, everybody can be gunning for, how will I put it, the obviouses. But to go into the SME space in a nation like ours that data has not always been where it should be, you know, it's a bit what's the word, cloudy. So it takes somebody of her pedigree with a lot of guts, you know. I mean, if you look at her personal resume, you know, she's a lawyer, MBA. She has an MBA. She has she's an alumni of Harvard, Oxford, INSEAD. I mean, we can go on and on.
Yeah, so let's talk about the latest entrant, Mr. Gede. She is trying to fill a very big role.
Absolutely.
And it really takes a lot. I wonder how she would perform, because there's a lot of high expectations. Everybody's talking about Dr. Wigwe and his works and all of that. You know, it could be daunting.
Yes, it could be. I believe that at another program I've had before, she doesn't have big shoes to fill. She just needs to wear her own shoes and come to the party. The circumstances are not pleasant. Nonetheless, people who give birth on the same day that somebody passes on have to also celebrate the babies that are born. So we will not cherry pick, but we will acknowledge, you know. So we celebrate her. We also celebrate Dr. Nneka. They're doing amazing things. I believe that I can instructively say, going by the feelers, that I wouldn't be surprised if Fidelity has an IPO coming up. You know, I mean, anybody who is even just interested, because they have literally improved their stocks from over 200%, you know, from when she ascended office. So there's been quite a lot in that space, and the ladies they're really, you know, coming to the party.
Yeah,
yes.
Well, it's time to party for the women. But we wish Ms. Agede the very best.
Do.
And of course, the media will be following her to ensure that. But thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, Ini. Have a wonderful one.
And you too.
Okay, thanks.
All right, it's almost time now, but we can tell you a little bit about the numbers of the market yesterday. The NGX rebounded strongly, 1.76% at 103,498.28. Equities was up at 56.632, and that's added about 980 billion naira at the close of trade. It was all green for activity sectors. Insurance was down, banking is back, and industrial goods. Okay, there we have the numbers. If I can just use that so you have a better picture and see it on your mind. So banking, consumer goods in the green, industrial and insurance, however, lost, but oil and gas, Seplat, had a great move, a big jump yesterday. And then we'll see how the market goes at intraday. So do join me at 1 p.m. for Business Incorporated. By then we'll have intraday numbers and see how the market is faring, and have a conversation also. So you don't want to miss it at 1 p.m. For now, let's go back to the Sunrise Daily studio.
touch on some aspects of the Constitution to bring them in line with current realities, particularly with the era of artificial intelligence. We are taking one senator per state because we are talking about constitutional amendment. One senator per state, and then we are also taking one senator representing each geopolitical zone.
All right, so on this plan to amend the Constitution, let's talk about some of the issues that came up on the floor. In the House, for instance, there was this bill that proposes constitutional alterations for a transition to parliamentary system of government. Now, this bill, the House seeks to ignite, provoke a national conversation about the future of Nigerian governance system, to ensure robust public debates, stakeholder consultations, expert analysis, and a thorough and informed decision-making process to raise awareness about this significant development and encourage constructive dialogue on the potential implications of these proposed constitutional alterations. The future of Nigerian governance rests on informed public engagement and responsive and responsible leadership. Now, he goes on to say that the fundamental changes outlined in the bills include: 1, parliamentary system, replacing the president with a prime minister to serve as the head of government, and establishing the office of the president as a ceremonial leader. These elective offices are to be chosen from the elected members of the legislature. 2, legislative elections, shifting the process of electing governors and chairmen of local government from general election to voting within their respective legislative bodies. And 3, streamlined administration that's potentially reducing bureaucratic hurdles and fostering closer collaboration between the executive and legislative branches. The House thinks that their conviction is streamlined executive branch, which replaces the president and vice president with a prime minister, and the cabinet from the legislature could lead to a smaller central government, reducing salaries and administrative expenses. They also do have perspectives on the local government matter, by the way. But that is what we plan to discuss, among other things, this morning with Dr. Samson Osagie, who joins us virtually this morning. Now, you may remember him. He was a member of the House of Representatives, former chief whip, is also a development consultant. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, Tambale, for having me on this program. Thank you. I was actually the minority whip, not the chief whip of the House.
Yeah, minority whip, House of Reps. I thought that was what I said. That's what was in my head, but maybe a different thing came out.
Maybe you are thinking of something that is in the future.
Okay, not a bad idea.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
Now that this bill is here, it's going to be a big one. It will have an impact if it eventually sails through. So tell me, as one who's been in the House before, what do you think of this bill? Okay, well, it was going to come back. It just froze for a bit. Dr. Samson, go ahead and talk to us what your perspective are about this bill, first and foremost.
Yes, thank you so much. I think that the Nigerian state of just now requires both structural
Okay, so don't have to worry. We'll just sort that out, and he come back to us on that matter. So he's talking about. We'll get his perspective though on what he thinks about this huge amendment. Now that's not the only thing. You heard the president of the Senate there talk about AI. They will also be amending the laws to find how they can incorporate that, because I mean they've talked about how they want a global regulatory body for AI because of the huge implications that it's got. So those are some of the issues that we'll be taking on with Dr. Samson Osagie this morning on the program. So we'll sort that out in just a moment.
And of course, they also talked about shifting the election of governors and local government chairmen from general election to votes within their respective legislative bodies. And they're saying this could save billions that are spent on state and nationwide campaigns.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Osagie, go ahead, please.
I'm back. So I believe that I'm one of those who believe that the structure of our government needs to be tinkered with. It is not working. There is no doubt about the fact that the current government is too heavy for the socio-economic development of our nation. And I think that a parliamentary arrangement will streamline functions of government and ensure accountability. If you watch the British Parliament, debating issues and questioning the ministers and members of cabinet, you will see a measure of a government that is working and accountability being delivered almost on a daily basis during debates. So apart from making government leaner and therefore saving resources and cost of governance, it makes for more accountability, as the head of government will continuously have to give account of the stewardship to the parliament. So I support it, and I think that I will make a contributions to the constitutional amendment process in writing in order to support this move. It is worthy of being looked at, because our government is not working both at the national level and at the sub-national level. It is not because those who are there don't mean well, but there is a structural challenge, for our nation.
Mr. Sage, I want to be able to ask you, about the structure that is in place right now. Are you saying that with the presidential system of government that we operate right now, it's absolutely impossible to cut down the cost of governance? Do we have to change to parliamentary to be able to do that?
Yes, it is absolutely possible. It is not because I was part of the system. I spent 8 years in the House of Representatives. But what is more important is not whether I'm part of the system. It is what will work for the country. It is absolutely impossible because the legislative and executive relationship does not make so much for accountability in the running of government.
What if we improve on those accountability mechanisms? What if we improve on that relationship?
It is going to be pretty difficult because of the doctrine, the supposed doctrine of separation of powers, and then the way we play our politics. So the executive wield so much power under the Constitution that, except for major constitutional requirements, it doesn't need a parliament. And most time, even when it needs the parliament, it had its way because the legislature is rather heavy, the executive powers are rather too unworthy for the legislature to be able to cope, and bring to accountability. So I believe that in the interest of the nation, we need to look back at that parliamentary system of government. We didn't quite practice it, for a long time to see whether it will work for us. We were just in a hurry to copy America soon after we left independence. And when the military came into governance, we were now in a hurry to re-democratize and copy the American version of the system of governance. We didn't quite practice parliamentary system to see whether it will be good for us in the long run. But experience have not shown that in the last over 24 years of continuous democratic government or civil government under presidential system of government, it has been challenges all the way, with increasing cost of governance, and it does not to be reduced by the very nature of a presidential system of government.
Dr. Sage, just playing that back, just theorizing sometimes too, the way this may likely play out. Yes, we had it in the First Republic, 6 years, very insignificant. Just as you also referenced, after that, we transited to presidential system. So I'm just wondering now how that will be if all the presidents we've had in the presidential system, they've got to go to the floor and then debate and defend their issues. The parliament, who sometimes may heckle them, depending on if they've got the capacity to withstand that and deliver on that, as it were. So in terms of impact on governance, what do you actually see changing? How will it impact governance at the end of the day?
Well, to start with, I believe that those who will be in the parliament will carry the huge burden of their various constituents to come to parliament. Some of them, by constitutional arrangements, will become members of the executive by appointment, and that is the nature of parliamentary system of government. And what that means is that you are now going to find those who make law. Some of them are those who also implement the law. Because if you see on the floor of the parliament, various motions that are coming from the various representatives of the parliament, various constituencies, asking government to do one thing or the other, some of which are not within the ambit of the budget. Those are the feelings and the wishes of the people that never get to see the light of the day. In a presidential democracy such as the one we practice, the government or the executive hardly implement any resolution of the parliament. So if we have a parliamentary system of government, such things will be adequately catered for because the prime minister and his cabinet are members of the same parliament. And it will be easy to take the feelings and the wishes of the constituents through their representative in the parliament, into account in terms of execution. In other words, we are going to have more of execution of parliamentary decisions which emanates from the representatives of the people across the country, much more making impact on the various constituents than we have under presidential system. Under the system, people can make their noise, they can smooth their motion, whatever they like. It never sees the light of the day. Nothing comes out of it. And it continuously, underdevelop the various constituencies across the country. So I believe that the parliamentary system of government will focus more on implementing the decisions of the parliament, which are more in tune with the needs of the people, rather than what we have strictly constrained in the budget proposed by the executive alone. And at the end of the day, even though the parliamentarians make input into the budget, the executive select and choose which to implement under the guise of paucity of funds. So it will implement on governance, I think, very much, and it will implement, it will impact on development again.
Mr. Sagi, I want to be able to, get you to talk about specifics. So everything I've heard you say and everything that we've heard from this story is about reducing the cost of governance. Can you give us an estimate of how much you think a parliamentary system would help reduce in the cost of governance? And we're seeing that we're looking at 2031. And also, how do you sell this to the Nigerian people and to politicians? How do you get them to get on board and give you the support that you and many other people who are proposing for this need to get this done?
Well, to start with, it's a conversation that is ongoing. It doesn't mean that it will be achieved now. But we have got to start the conversation, because the whole essence of democracy is for the people to be able to engage, government and all stakeholders. Now, I give you practical examples. If the president were to be the prime minister and a member of parliament, and with a president, you have a president, you have a prime minister, so you have in certain organizations. Now, it will be easier for the prime minister to carry the wishes of the parliament, which will form the budget, because the budget system under a parliamentary system of government is different from the budget system under a presidential system of government, where the constitution has said the president shall prepare the budget and lay. In the parliamentary system of government, it is the parliament made up of the prime minister himself and his cabinet that prepares the budget, and they discuss the nitty-gritty of what the nation needs into the budget. So at that stage, all the things that are taken into account, are implementable, because those who are to implement it are part of the process of the preparation and, of course, consideration in the parliament.
So just to let
I think that it is possible.
Pardon me, Dr. Sagi, just to let some of our viewers know that there's a press conference by the former presidential candidate of Labour Party, which is ongoing right now. So, Dr. Sagi, now we know that
more people, so we limited what we had to just radio.
This particular proposal, this bill, as it were. But do you really see this passing? What challenges do you see this facing if it does? I mean, when it gets to the floor.
Changes are always difficult to achieve. Definitely, one must expect that it will not receive immediate blessings. But the nature of nature of democracy is that if it fails now, it does not stop it from coming up, because the factors that are necessitating the rethinking of our structure of government right now may continue to be there. So unless those factors are no longer there, then we can be talking. For example, the issue of local government autonomy has been a recurring decimal in our constitutional amendment process. And the National Assembly has always proposed, and even the presidency have always proposed, for the local government system to work. But they are not working right now, because those who are leading the subnational government do not want that level of government to operate optimally, albeit for selfish reasons. So it will be an ongoing conversation. It doesn't succeed now. It does not stop the conversation from continuing, and it does not stop Nigerians and parliamentarians who believe that a rethinking about the structure of our government, is something that is worthwhile.
Okay, but 60, we understand about 60 lawmakers actually are rooting for this. So probably if they were to stop at that, we know that that won't definitely fly. But I guess they'll have to involve themselves in a lot more lobbying their members to ensure that this one, this time flies. But one wonders, do you see this affecting the quality of the people who come on board, who will become parliamentarians, who will be elected? Because, I mean, there are times that sometimes you don't see your constituency or people who represent you contribute the way you want, or sometimes you just feel what's going on. So is that likely to change in any way whatsoever if we switch to this system?
Of course, it will affect the details of the delimitation of constituencies and the number of parliamentarians that will be required to be in the national parliament. It definitely will lead to that because it will amount to a serious restructuring of the representation system, for the parliament. Because whoever goes to the parliament has a chance of becoming the prime minister, secretary to the government, in whatever capacity. So it definitely will. But let me also say this, that we must see this approach as an idea that is now being generated by 60 members. It does not mean that that will give the nod to it because it has the House of Rep to contend with, it has the House of Senate to contend with, it has the presidency that is actually the head of government, to contend with. So it must be a conversation that must include all. It's a constitutional amendment thing. It cannot be done by just 60 members. The House of Representatives, the governors of the state, must be stakeholders that must contribute to it. The judiciary also has a role to play in all of this. So just see it as an idea that has just been generated that will continue. The conversation about it will continue, not necessarily whether it succeeds at this point.
Well, Dr. Sagi, one of the questions that comes to my mind is a product of a report, a research work. Dated February 1966, the Nigerian Opinion said, in short, the rulers used power that they held constitutionally to do unconstitutional things. In the process, they destroyed themselves. Nigeria had censuses that were not censuses, elections that were not elections, and finally, governments that were not governments. This is from February 1966. What's to say that that will not happen again if we return to a parliamentary government? Dr. Sagi, can you hear me? All right, well, I guess we'll have to get our conversation back because it's one of the questions a number of people will want to ask because we have used that system of government before. We have run a parliamentary system of government for a few months, as Chamberlain put it. And for whatever reason, it didn't really work. We used it for 6 years, by the way, and it didn't, really work. So what happened? We had a prime minister, we had a ceremony of president, as is exactly as it's been proposed now. In fact, the system had kind of been running before the full transition to the civil rule of 1960. That began in 1960 with the lowering of the Union Jack. And here we are today talking about this same particular issue. What exactly is responsible for that collapse? I think it's one of those issues that needs to be exposed. Dr. Sagi, can you hear me? Okay. Well, we have that conference that Chamberlain talked about the other time happening now, the press conference being hosted by the presidential candidate of the Labour Party in the last election. Go ahead.
We wanted to ensure that we leverage resources wisely, and I'm proud to say that, and the team is proud to say that, of the different vendors that we engaged on across different tasks, delivered exceedingly well. They delivered based off of the resources that were given to them. Then we also adopted a framework to ensure disbursed funds were used judiciously. Very important. We want to ensure that when we give resources to vendors, people who worked on the project, that they use these funds judiciously. We adopted that process. Then fund disbursements were made with approval from His Excellency and 2 other signatories to provide constant oversight. So whatever decision we took in terms of disbursing funds, we are made with the full acknowledgement of His Excellency and also signatories to the account. So no funds left the account without the approval of His Excellency, so as to provide constant oversight. Now, conflict of interest rules were established to ensure decision on fund disbursement are made based on value and merit. It was very important to ensure that there were no conflict of interest. So you would find a situation whereby members of the procurement team, members of key decision makers had no role in terms of, there were no conflict of interest. What do I mean by conflict of interest? It was a policy that monies would not flow into private accounts, would flow into business accounts, and no member of the official team in any way had any access to whatever funds they were disbursed. It was very important to ensure there were no conflict of interest. So we made decisions based off of the merit as opposed to any conflict of interest. So that was a core philosophy powered by the virtues and values that His Excellency stands for. That the values he stood for influenced how we disbursed our assignment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Century, for that.
Well, once more, thank you. I had to call this process, which I'm sure I'll follow up in due course in other areas, because we've come to the end of this exercise. It is now time to account to those who supported us, be able to brief them. We're also going to commence our thank you talk, to express our gratitude, and continue in doing the right things for Nigeria, because you can't just say it's only when you're in office that you're going to do the right things. It is something that you have to do continuously. Thank you.
You came to last. Okay. You use the mic to him. You want to start? Okay. Just wait a minute. Just leave it. So please. Want to speak to him?
Good morning, Excellency. My fellow colleagues here. I am Gloria Kiba. I report for Nigeria Police's online news portal where we get events our second. Now, this is a very good, I would say, transparent for next time. Nigerians have been waiting, to be following up, to know how this money is expended, especially the trust they have with PO. This is for Nigeria. My concern is the diaspora contributions. That will be another period where the money is realized, from the Nigerians in the diaspora. And also, because they would also want to know if monies came in, how was it utilized judiciously, and to know where further support will come. I believe that's the next step, because that will be the next conversation that will start happening, because people will start talking. So we'd like to know monies that came in from diaspora and how it was spent. Very, very great work.
So, okay. Let me.
Yeah, you want me to?
Okay. Let me start. First is that, like Aisha did mention, there's been all sorts of comments and allegations. In fact, one of the people who mentioned said we received about $150 million. let me categorically state it, that all the funds received directly or indirectly from diaspora is not up to it's about not up to 1% of what is mentioned. And this, some of it are part of what have been exchanged and given to Aisha. We're actually going to go to the various people who supported us in diaspora to say thank you and tell them what was realized. And we also are going to put an information out there that whoever knows where funds are supposed to have been remitted to help us trace and get that. But know that people are claiming we received about $150 million. And as 30 years, we haven't seen 1%. And I stand for anybody to dispute or prove that.
Okay, yeah. You ask that question, please. You are not to, please.
Excellency, yeah, this is a move in the right direction. But you see, as you are doing this for your campaign organization, what becomes of the party? There are so many allegations. And somehow you have not spoken. I've already the chairman has been accused of stealing money, even Aisha herself was accused.